It's Lara here with this week's Witchy Wednesday astrology forecast for the week of July 17th to 23rd, 2019. Thank you for being here, for spending some time with me. We have some different things to talk about today, and we'll get to that in just a second. But, how did the eclipse treat you? So the lunar eclipse in Capricorn fell yesterday on the 16th. At 24 degrees Capricorn, right? And in last week's video, if you didn't see it, I did a sort of thorough examination of the eclipse energies and where they're falling for each of us in our chart. And if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to go back and check it out, because this is part of a larger story playing out, right? For all of us. It's not like this just happened and now we're done with it. That's not the way eclipse energies work. And so if you didn't see last week's video, and lately I've been doing these videos in two parts, where this first part is the introduction, which is really probably the most important part to listen to. And then in the second video, I go through each of the signs, speaking to a specific, aspect or astrological kind of event that is happening, and where that's taking place in the chart for each of us. And sometimes I speak to more than one event, and I'm going to do that today. But that's going to be either at the end of this video or in part two. It always depends how long the intro takes, but realistically, likely in part two. So before we get to all that stuff, though, I guess the first thing I want to say is, I already said thank you for being here. I'm going to say it again. It means more than you know. I really do appreciate it. When you interact with these videos, when you hit the like button, when you subscribe to the channel, when you go over to Facebook and interact there, or Instagram, and the links to those are always below, it helps me spread the word, right? This is my livelihood. I do a few other things on the side here and there, but this is what I do. So it's really helpful to me for you to spread the word, right? If what I say resonates with you. And of course, if you're interested in getting a reading with me, you can do that at the link below at my website. Okay, so let's start with where the moon is at. Sorry for that pause. Mercury retrograde right now, right? Sometimes takes a minute for the mouth to catch up, or the brain, or those two things to sync up. So we've got the moon entering Aquarius later today. So that full moon lunar eclipse happened in Capricorn, right? And I don't know about you. I don't know how that felt for you in general, eclipse aside. But when the moon is in Capricorn, it's really nose to the grindstone time, I find, where for me personally, I can get a lot done. And a lot of that has to do with my creative output, which I consider, my work in many ways. So I got a lot of things done on that level in the last few days while the moon was in Capricorn. Now the moon's entering Aquarius, right? Where we can, we have this sense of urge for freedom, perhaps, for doing things a bit differently, for, Aquarius is a bit eccentric, and we have more of a sense of emotional detachment, right? The moon rules our emotions. Aquarius is an air sign that is somewhat emotionally detached. And so we can kind of feel that vibe while the moon is in Aquarius. And then the moon is entering Pisces on Friday, and it will enter Aries on Monday. And we'll be there until the next Witchy Wednesday report. So aside from that, this is what's going on this week. Today, Wednesday, July 17th, we have Asteroid Ceres stationing direct in the sign of Sagittarius. So this is one of the things I'm going to speak to in regards to each sign. Because when I was looking at, the chart and the astrology for the week, I thought, what can I talk about this week? We've had so much going on with, so much heavy stuff with these eclipses and things. Looking at the chart, like there's no new moon, there's no full moon, because I talked about that in last week's video. So what's happening here? And as I sort of pondered this and I was looking at the chart, a couple of the asteroids and what they're doing jumped out at me. And the more I looked at it and the more I thought about it, I thought this is really relevant, I believe. And so this is what I'm going to address when I go through each of the signs. So I will remind you in case, or let you know if you're a first timer here, I'm not an expert on the asteroids by any stretch, but I find them really interesting. The more I learn about them, the more I want to know. And I find that they are quite significant when it comes to the astrology and how they play out for us collectively and in our individual charts. And, Ceres is a dwarf planet, right? Just like Pluto. And the more we learn about Ceres, and I think the more astrologers work with Ceres, they realize that just like Pluto, she's quite a powerful influence. And so we're going to talk about Ceres a little bit more. Because as I said, she's moving direct in Sagittarius, and she's been in Sag since late January, so January 26th, 2019. And she's stationed retrograde in April, around April 10th. And she's stationing direct today, and she'll be in Sag until mid-November, around the 15th. So we're going to talk about this and her forward motion, right? That and what that means for us potentially on a collective level, and then later on I'll address each of the signs. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper there. We have on the 19th, Mercury retrograding back into Cancer from Leo. So Mercury's retrograde and, stationed retrograde in Leo, and then started moving backwards. Not really. The planets don't move. Mercury doesn't move backwards. The planets don't move backwards. It appears that way from our perspective on Earth, right? So this is why we use that terminology. So Mercury is retrograding back into the sign of Cancer. And Mercury will be in Cancer until around August 11th, August 12th, around there. And will station direct on July 31st in Cancer, and then keep moving forward, right? And as I said, move out around August 11th. So this movement of Mercury back into the sign of Cancer in a retrograde motion. So remember, retrograde is about a turning inward, a reflection, a review, a recalibration, all those rewords, like even things like rejuvenation, recuperation, right? These sorts of things. It's where we want to go back over ground we've already been on with a more discerning eye, listening for the messages that may be bubbling up internally in that area, wherever Mercury's transiting through. Fine-tuning things that we may have already addressed once. Now we have to go back over them, right? So, and this can also be a time of sort of things from the past coming back up for review. So when Mercury is in Cancer in general, this is a focus on, quality over quantity regarding our communications, our thoughts, information, that sort of thing, right? And our communications, our thoughts, our ideas, our even our short distance travel, because Mercury rules that too, that mobility piece, can be more focused on home, family, those Cancerian themes. And our thinking and our communications, may be more emotionally driven when Mercury is in Cancer as well. And just centered around, like I said, home, family, and all of that, right? So wherever Cancer sits for you in the chart, and I'm not going to go through that again today because we've been talking a lot about this in terms of these eclipses in particular, the Cancer Capricorn axis. We've been talking about that in general all year, many times because of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, right? And so if you've listened to any of these videos already, I'm sure you probably have an idea of where Cancer sits in the chart for you. So we're not going to go over that particular piece. And I did address this specific Mercury retrograde a couple of videos ago, so you can go back and listen to that if you want as well. But one thing I would say is, think about what transpired on or around the solar eclipse that happened in the sign of Cancer on July 2nd, right? And, like what new intentions did you set, or what sort of new beginnings started to happen for you around then? What did you begin at that time? And that can be on any number of levels. It can be something you began sort of more internally, right? A shifting in perspective even. It can be anything. It depends on where this falls in your chart and what that means for you. But whatever that is, when Mercury's retrograding back into Cancer, it's kind of that time now to revisit that, to like go, okay, it's like, something new started to be birthed around that time. Now let's go back to that and see, where we maybe need to fine tune things or rethink them or review them or all of those things, right? So that's what's going on with the Mercury retro. The other thing we have happening, and yes, I am going to show you the chart in a couple minutes, but we have Venus conjuncting the North Node in Cancer, and that is sitting right opposite Saturn in the chart. And that's happening today, tomorrow, around, these next few days. And so that can be a bit, it can be a bit of tension, pressure, a need for balancing kind of between work and play, that sort of vibe. It can have us feeling a bit blah even, but just know this too shall pass. It's not a long-term transit. And it can be a time when, kind of like a good way to show your love, Venus, is through practical matters, right? That Saturn piece. So doing something practical to show people that you love them. Or to even, things like getting, Venus is about, what we enjoy, what brings us pleasure as well, what we value. And so doing something hands-on can be helpful, right? Like, so gardening and cooking, those hands-on pleasures, it brings together, it balances those energies of Saturn and Venus. Taking responsibility for our relationships, Venus, right? And, maybe thinking about where are we dropping the ball there, and what can we do about that? What practical thing maybe can we do about that? Taking responsibility for our finances. But the conjunction to the North Node, right? Remember, the North Node is where we're headed, to put it very simply. Where we're being called to evolve towards, embrace more of those qualities, right? And that's the North Node is in Cancer. And so this is showing us that ultimately, love is the way, Venus, that Venus piece, right? It's the direction we're being called to go in. I was thinking about, that old phrase. I'm maybe dating myself here, but all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy kind of thing. That was an old thing that people used to say. And so this can have that vibe. This opposition can have that vibe. So, we want to ultimately do the work, but then we also want to have some enjoyment, right? Have a gentle approach, a compassionate approach to your relationships, but to, if if you're feeling this kind of tug of war between work and play, try to be gentle with that. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with other people. Try to find a balance of both of those things. So some kind of, like I said, practical enjoyment would be a good way to use this energy. And the other thing is Venus is also in conversation with Neptune. Venus is trining Neptune over these next few days. And so there's more support there, right? Support to take the compassionate, empathetic route, tender approach sort of thing. Perhaps being of service, doing something creative, artistic, and ultimately enjoying some kind of, healthy escapism, entertainment after the Saturn work is done. After the work, then balance that with some relaxation, some play. And so, the other thing we're going to talk a little more at length about in a minute here is Asteroid Pallas Athene is in Libra right now, and she is in square to the nodes, the North Node and the South Node. She's sitting at 17 degrees Libra, and she's squaring the nodes, and so that's significant. I see it as significant anyway. She's been in Libra since November 4th, 2018, so that she's been there for a while. She's stationed retrograde in February of 2019, and then stationed direct on the 31st. So she is moving direct, right? She has been for a while. And like I said, now she's at 17 Libra and squaring the nodes. And I'm going to speak to, like I said, I'm going to speak to this and the significance of that in a little more detail. And last but not least, happening this week on Monday is we have the sun moving to its home sign of Leo. So happy birthday to Leo. This is, your birthday month is approaching. And the sun, like I said, is at home in Leo, right? It can really shine to its fullest potential in Leo. Think about in August in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the height of summer. The sun is at its most brilliant and its most bright. So this is really a time for us to, to have fun, to really shine. And it's a time to kind of express ourselves as well. Leos are known for that, right? They're big personalities, and their expression. I have 2 Leo children, so I know this, and my husband's a Leo rising. Anyway, and so I'm tuned in to the Leo energy for sure. So it's a good way to really, or a good time to really, harness this exuberance and this kind of childlike quality even. And like everything, you've heard me say this before, there's always a light side and a shadow side to all these energies, right? And so the shadow side of Leo energy to watch out for is being overly dramatic, self-centered, even to the point where we're talking like really shadow narcissistic, right? So we want to be mindful of that and steer away from that, and really harness those really good qualities of Leo. Leo is also very generous, right? It's a good time to be very generous. I don't know, host some barbecue and feed people well, and just really set the stage. That's a Leo term, to have a lot of for people to have a lot of fun and enjoyment. So those are all the things. Those are all the things this week. And we're going to talk more in detail about the Ceres and the Pallas Athene piece. But I'm going to show you the chart first. So here we are. This is the chart for today, right? And it's a little busy because I do have a couple of asteroids on the chart as well. So let's see here. Where shall we start? Well, there we've got Venus conjuncting the North Node in Cancer, right? And opposing that Saturn, right? 17 degrees is the South Node. Saturn's at 16 degrees right now. So, very close, and there's an opposition. Pluto's fairly close as well, but not as close as Saturn, right? So we spoke about that. And there's Ceres at 0 degrees Sagittarius, and she will be stationing direct later today. And then we've got Libra. Yes, this is Libra. But we have Pallas Athene sitting here in Libra at 17 degrees, like I spoke of. And so she is, right, 17 degrees. What else is at 17? The nodes. So squaring, right, at a 90-degree angle to the nodes. We're going to talk about that in more detail. There's the Neptune piece. We spoke about Neptune trining Venus because Neptune is at 18. Venus is down there at 17, about to move to 18. And I think for our purposes today, that's really all I want to really draw your attention to. So, oh, and there's the sun. Sorry. There's the sun in Cancer, but soon to move into the sign of Leo. So that's what's shaken down on the chart today. Oh, and the Mercury retrograde too. Mercury right there, sorry, in Leo. Right? About to retrograde back into Cancer. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into Ceres and Pallas Athene and what they're doing here. So, in mythology, Asteroid Ceres, right? Ceres, she's not an asteroid in mythology. She's an asteroid in astronomy and astrology. But so in mythology, Ceres was known as Demeter, right? The goddess Demeter. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that exactly right, but to the Greeks. And she's the equivalent of Isis to the ancient Egyptians. In North American indigenous, like some indigenous cultures, she's known as the Corn Mother. Or what else did I find? Selu, S-E-L-U, would be another name for her to some people, right? Some peoples. And so it's interesting to see, right? When you're looking at the mythology of these goddesses, what I always like to try to do is so we can have a more kind of balanced perspective, or we can see that these archetypes are not just, like, they don't just exist in one cultural form or one they run throughout cultures, throughout history. They're just called different things, but they're the same archetype. And so, sometimes, like when I'm doing work on the goddesses, I like to try to do a little research on that and at least give you a couple of different ideas of, yes, she's Ceres, and that's traditionally in astrology what we call her, but she is also known by other names in other cultures throughout history. So same principles, right? So essentially, though, she is this energy or this archetype of the Earth Mother. I think of her as Mother Nature in a sense, Mama Bear, as well. She's the goddess of agriculture, of mothering, of nurturing. Similar energetically, I feel similar qualities to Cancer in some ways, which I think is relevant, right? Because this is where the North Node is at in Cancer, calling us towards these Cancerian qualities of nurturing and mothering and home and family and that sort of thing. And Ceres is really reflective of what we need to feel nurtured, what makes us feel nurtured, and how we nurture others as well. So you can see how that is kind of connected to the Cancer energy, right? And Ceres moving direct, right, is a forward motion and a more outward expression of the energy, whereas she's been more internalized, more kind of stalled when she's been in retrograde motion. Now that she's moving forward, we're getting this boost, right, of this Ceres energy. And so we will sense and see a forward motion in some of these themes that may have been stalled, right? And that we may have been even reflecting on, reviewing those sorts of retrograde motion kind of things, right? So one of the things that Ceres is associated with is grief, And in part, that has to do with the fact that she has to do with separation of mother and child, abduction, and in the mythology, she was the mother of Persephone, right? And Persephone was abducted and taken to the underworld for a time. And so that's where that association comes from. And this is really kind of interesting to me. This is one of the things, like when this clicked, I got goosebumps, and I have them right now, actually, just talking about this, because to me, this is like really a real world example of this is going on, right? When we see the child detainees in the U.S. at the border, the immigrant children that are being detained there, and some pretty poor conditions. And it will be really interesting with the forward motion of Ceres to see what starts to happen now. And I think we're going to see some, some news in that area. We're going to see some forward motion there. And that may be driven by, the mamas, right? The mama bear energy kind of thing that Ceres embodies. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And each of our charts, of course, Ceres is sitting in whatever house Sagittarius sits for us. And so we may get this forward surge of energy, or outward surge of energy, or release of energy in relation to these things. And I'm going to talk about that in the next video when I speak to each sign. So that's Ceres, right? And asteroid Ceres. And then the other thing I mentioned to you was Pallas, right? Pallas Athene. She's sitting in Libra and at 17 degrees there, and she is squaring the moon's nodes. So the north and south node, right? South node in Capricorn, what we want to release, move away from, and north node in Cancer, right? What we want to embrace, move towards. And so in some other, archetypally in the mythology, some other goddesses similar to Athena are Bast, goddess Bast in ancient Egypt, and Freya in Norse mythology, and Brigid in Celtic mythology. Those would be similar qualities, right, to Pallas Athene. Pallas Athene in the mythology was born fully formed from the head of Zeus, and she came out in like full armor. And there's a story about her battling Neptune or Poseidon for who would take ownership of the city of Athens. And what happened was, just to put it, really shorten it, they squared off, right, to see who would be the patron of Athens. And Neptune or Poseidon, he pounded his trident on the ground, and a big surge of water came up and came to the ground and formed a pool. And then Athena, she pounded her spear on the ground, and the first olive tree sprouted from the ground. And so the people decided that Athena had given them the more valuable gift. This is something that would sustain them. And so they chose Athena, and that's why Athens is called Athens. And so, some of her qualities are, she's the warrior goddess, right? Wise warrior. She has to do with, creative resourcefulness. And she's very perceptive and prophetic. She's the protectress, and she's a very clever and strategic thinker as well, with this ability to see patterns. And she's like the character, right? Wonder Woman, who was an Amazonian, right? And Athena, Pallas Athena, has this connection to Medusa, who is the snake goddess of the Amazonian tribe. And Medusa is pictured on Athena's shield. So if you think about, to put it really simply, if you think about Wonder Woman, that's sort of the Athena archetype, right? And here's the significance for us. Planets that square the nodes of the moon, in evolutionary astrology, right, which is really my foundation, they can point to things that can kind of trip us up on our evolutionary journey, right? So right now, Pallas Athena is in square to the nodes. So this is something I feel to take note of, to be mindful of, because wherever Pallas is sitting in the chart can be an area that is, if we're not mindful of it, if we're not conscious of it, if we don't take action accordingly to resolve the tension of the square, it can stall us from moving towards, from growing, it can stall our growth, from moving towards our, the North Node in Cancer energies, which is where we are being called to right now. So that's why I thought it was significant, right? So this can represent, this square to the nodes, this blockage of accessing our feminine qualities. Athena has an association with this. She's quite a sort of a more masculine archetype, right? But she is, that's, because she's this warrior goddess and a fighter and Amazonian, right? But ultimately, she is a woman. And so the Amazons were a matriarchal society. And so, this, I feel like, to me, this is kind of something to consider, is where might we be denying ourselves a sense of belonging to a sisterhood, for example, or where are we afraid of embracing the creative resourcefulness that is, the feminine. And we need to resolve this kind of stalemate, this tension, right? This friction. We need to take action. So we need to kind of, find the courage to stand up and take action, there's many ways that this can speak to us, but ultimately the key here, I feel like, is we need to not take the default position, right, which is the South Node in Capricorn, of falling back into this kind of more masculine energy of the patriarchy. And again, I'll remind you, when I'm talking about masculine, feminine, it doesn't necessarily mean men and women. We all have these energies within each of us, right? And so am I suggesting that the tables need to turn completely and we need to move to a matriarchal society completely? No, but there's clearly an imbalance, right, that's going on. And so this is about bringing back that balance, and we're not going to do that through doing things the way we've always done them, right, which is the patriarchal way. And so there is this risk here with Pallas squaring the nodes that we will revert back to the South Node, right, the past, the old ways of doing things. And we're afraid to kind of let that go and embrace a more feminine way, right, of doing things. And feminine doesn't mean weak. Clearly, right? Pallas Athene was certainly not weak. That's not the kind of energy that she exudes or embodies. So the other thing about Pallas Athena in the mythology is she was her father's favorite, and she had actually never met her mother. So if we just simply think about that, right? The default, the comfort zone is the masculine, what we're used to. And so again, it's that pull towards those Capricorn South Node themes. And because she's in Libra right now, right? This makes her a good mediator and a moderator. But I think that, again, because of the square, it's like, don't allow yourself to be debilitated by people pleasing, right? Libra can have that tendency on the shadow side. So to me, ultimately, the catchphrase for this is courage over comfort, which is a Brene Brown saying. I don't take credit for that at all, but I did post on Facebook and Instagram, a Brene Brown quote the other day that has to do with, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You can't choose both. And this was in line with the lunar eclipse energies, but this is all part of the story. And so when I looked at the chart and I saw this Pallas Athena squaring the nodes, I thought, we have a choice to make: courage over comfort. That's it, in a nutshell. And so I'm going to talk about this in the next video, and the Ceres piece, and how that's going to play out for each of us, in what house that we may be feeling these energies. And I'm really curious to know if this talk about the asteroids resonates with you, because I find it really does for me. And I'm curious to know, how you feel about it. And when I speak to each of the signs in the next video, if it's something that kind of brings another layer of insight, to you. And, if it's helpful, if it resonates, I'd love to know. So I'm going to leave this here, part 1 of this video. I'm going to catch you in part 2, where we're going to go through the signs. And I thank you so, so, so much for being here. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel and all of that. Okay, I do appreciate it. So I'll see you in part 2. Bye-bye.